So it's been recognized for about at least the last 20 years that one of the main threats to marine conservation is not actually the external threats to the ecosystem like nutrient pollution or climate change or diseases, but it's actually our own sort of mentality towards the way that we think about these ecosystems. And the challenge is that as each new generation of visitors comes into a place like the Florida Keys and is entranced by its beauty, by its biodiversity, its productivity, and its richness, we lose the historical perspective. Each new generation comes in, has its own what we call a baseline that they compare against, and these baselines for what is intact natural systems keep changing. And it's a slippery slope. As the 20th century progressed, we started with systems that were truly perhaps somewhat pristine ecosystems, certainly in the marine realm, and we ended up with systems that have been highly disrupted and are much less biodiverse. But because we don't have a perception anymore of what has been lost, it means that our targets for biodiversity conservation keep shrinking. With each new generation of scientists and with each new generation of visitor, what is natural is always kind of set at the point where the visitor or the scientist first observes the system. So in my case, my first dive on a Florida coral reef was in 1993, and so in some cases, in some respects, my baseline for what is natural is set at that point. And if I could wind back the clock and get back to 1993, I would love to do that in a heartbeat. We had many more corals there, we had more fish, we probably had better water quality. But that would be missing the point that if we could have wound the clock back even more to say 1973, the system would have been much better than even 1993. So in a sense, I've missed that historical perspective and that baseline, and that itself hinders my ability to kind of imagine what was lost and work towards getting it back.
So what does that mean for the future generations? Can you explain how this lowering of the baseline, what is that going to mean in 30 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that again. So it's sort of a scary prospect that with each new generation, we kind of sell ourselves short in what the natural world should look like. An example is that the population of green sea turtles in the Caribbean is probably 1% or less of what it historically used to be before humans arrived on the scene. And if you looked at the current population of green sea turtles in the Caribbean and said, as a conservation goal in the next 15 years, we'd like to double the population of those sea turtles, that would be a wonderful and extremely ambitious target. And yet, all it would be doing is changing it from 1% of its former abundance to 2% of its former abundance. And so you can see that even our most ambitious conservation goals are minimal compared to the overall impact that we've had on the system. So